I trusted him with everything. My future, my silence, my loyalty. But betrayal doesn't always scream. Sometimes it smiles at you across the dinner table. The night I realized the truth, my hands didn't shake. My heart did. They had planned everything quietly, assuming I was blind, weak, replaceable. I didn't confront them. I didn't cry. I listened. And in that silence, something dangerous was born. This isn't a story about revenge with shouting or violence. This is about what happens when a woman stops explaining herself and lets betrayal destroy itself. And you'll feel every second of it tonight, watching. I used to believe betrayal arrived loudly, with shouting, accusations, and broken things. I was wrong. In my world, betrayal arrived quietly, wearing politeness like perfume. It sat beside me at family dinners, poured me tea, asked about my day, and smiled as if nothing was wrong. I didn't suspect anything at first because I trusted too easily. I thought love made people honest. I thought loyalty was natural. What I didn't understand back then was that some people don't plan relationships. They calculate them. And while I was dreaming about a shared future, they were already discussing my value, my usefulness, and my limits behind closed doors I wasn't meant to open. When I entered his life, I entered it sincerely. No games, no backup plans. I adjusted myself slowly, quietly, believing compromise was a sign of maturity. His family seemed respectable, disciplined, and controlled. They spoke softly, but their questions were sharp. Where I studied, what my parents did, how independent I really was. At first, I answered with pride. Later, I noticed how my answers were remembered, repeated, twisted. Nothing was ever forgotten, nothing was ever forgiven. I felt like I was being observed, not welcomed. Still, I stayed calm, telling myself that trust takes time, that acceptance doesn't happen overnight. The first real crack appeared when his behavior changed, not suddenly, not dramatically. He started pausing before answering simple questions. His phone became a private world. Conversations ended too quickly when I entered the room. I noticed how he defended his family instantly, but asked me to understand when I felt uncomfortable. Slowly, my emotions became inconvenient. My concerns were labeled overthinking. My silence was called moviness. That's how betrayal grows. It makes you doubt your instincts before it reveals itself. And I let it happen because I believed patience would protect the relationship. One evening changed everything. I wasn't meant to hear the conversation, but silence has a way of exposing truth. His sister spoke calmly, almost professionally, discussing my future as if I were a proposal document. She talked about control, access, and expectations, about how women like me adjust too much, give too much, and leave too little of themselves behind. Nobody defended me. Nobody corrected her. That's when I realized betrayal wasn't personal, it was structural. It was agreed upon, planned, approved. I stood frozen, not hurt by her words, but by the certainty in her voice. That night, I didn't cry. I didn't confront anyone. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment I had ignored, every smile that felt forced, every compliment that sounded measured. Fear didn't come immediately. Clarity did. And clarity is heavier than fear. I understood that I wasn't loved for who I was, but tolerated for what I provided. From that moment, something inside me shut down quietly. I didn't announce it. I didn't warn them. I simply stopped being available emotionally. Betrayal thought it had won. It didn't realize it had just been noticed. After that night, I became careful in a way I had never been before. Not suspicious, calculated. There is a difference. Suspicion reacts emotionally. Calculation observes patiently. I stopped sharing my thoughts freely. I stopped explaining my feelings. I reduced myself to what they expected on the surface while protecting everything real underneath. They didn't notice at first. People who underestimate you rarely notice when you change direction. They assumed my silence meant submission. In reality, it meant preparation. Betrayal had exposed its shape, and now I could see exactly where it would collapse if pushed gently enough. Days passed, and the atmosphere shifted. His mother started watching me more closely, as if trying to read something she could no longer access. Conversations became awkward, filled with forced kindness and unnecessary praise. Compliments arrived late, almost rehearsed. They were trying to regain control without admitting they had lost it. I responded with the same politeness I always had, but without warmth. Emotional distance is terrifying to people who rely on emotional access to manipulate. I could feel their discomfort growing, even though nothing obvious had changed on the outside. He noticed it next. He asked if something was wrong, if I was tired, if work was stressing me out. His concerns sounded genuine, but I had learned that tone can lie even when words behave. I told him I was fine, and I was, because once you accept betrayal, confusion disappears. He didn't push further. He never did. That was another realization. People who truly care push gently. People who benefit from you stay comfortable. My silence had become a mirror, and he didn't like what it reflected. Behind the scenes, I began securing myself quietly. Important documents were copied, financial boundaries were clarified, personal plans were adjusted. Not in panic, not in anger, but with precision. Every move I made was invisible to them because they never imagined I would act without emotional signals. They believed strength announced itself loudly. They didn't understand that real strength moves quietly, efficiently, and without witnesses. The more composed I became, the more uneasy they grew. Control slipping away creates fear faster than confrontation ever could. The turning point came during a family gathering. Nothing dramatic happened, no arguments, no accusations, just subtle tension. His sister avoided eye contact. His mother spoke too much. His father observed silently. I realized they were all waiting for a reaction, a demand, a breakdown, something that would put me back into a predictable role. I gave them none. I smiled when appropriate, I spoke when addressed, and I left early, calmly. That simple act unsettled them more than any confrontation would have. Later that night, he asked again what had changed. I looked at him for a long moment before answering, not searching for words, measuring truth. I said I was learning to respect myself more. Nothing else. No blame, no explanation. He nodded slowly, as if realizing something important, but too late. Betrayal doesn't always end with exposure. Sometimes it ends with awareness. And awareness is dangerous, because once someone sees clearly, they can never be controlled the same way again. By the time they realized I was slipping away, it was already too late. Distance doesn't announce itself. It settles in slowly, like dust no one bothers to clean until breathing becomes difficult. I stopped asking for approval. I stopped waiting for permission. I stopped adjusting my opinions to keep peace. That scared them. People who thrive on control fear independence more than rebellion. Rebellion can be crushed. Independence cannot. They tried subtle tactics at first. Emotional reminders, nostalgic conversations, selective kindness. But those tricks only work when someone still hopes to belong. I no longer did. His mother tried to reconnect, asking about my plans, my career, my thoughts. The same questions that once felt invasive now sounded desperate. I answered briefly, politely, without detail. Information had become currency, and I was no longer paying. She noticed. I could see it in the way her smile tightened, in the way her voice softened unnaturally. She wasn't concerned about me. She was concerned about losing influence. Betrayal doesn't regret hurting you. It regrets losing access to you. That truth settled in me calmly, without anger. He began to feel the pressure next. Confusion replaced confidence. He wasn't sure where he stood anymore, and uncertainty made him uneasy. One night, he admitted he felt like he was losing me. I didn't deny it. I didn't confirm it either. I just listened. Silence, once again, did the work words never could. He spoke about misunderstandings, about intentions, about how families complicate things. But he never said I mattered more than their comfort. That omission was louder than any confession. Betrayal always reveals itself in what people refuse to say. The final shift happened internally, not externally. I detached completely. Not emotionally numb, emotionally free. I stopped imagining outcomes that included them. I started planning a future where my peace wasn't negotiable. And when you stop needing validation, people lose leverage. They sensed it. Conversations became cautious, decisions were delayed. They were waiting for me to return to my old role. I never did. I had outgrown the version of myself they could manipulate. When I finally stepped away, there was no dramatic exit, no confrontation, no announcement, just distance made permanent. That's when the panic began. Messages increased, apologies surfaced, explanations arrived uninvited. Suddenly, they wanted clarity, closure, conversation. But closure is a privilege, not a right. I had already closed the door quietly while they were busy underestimating me. Regret followed them, not me. I felt relief, not loss. I heard later how tension filled the spaces I once occupied, how blame shifted, how trust fractured. My absence became a presence they couldn't ignore. That was the irony. They only felt my value when I was no longer available to absorb their expectations. Betrayal had collapsed under its own weight, not because I fought it, but because I refused to carry it anymore. Walking away wasn't weakness. It was the strongest decision I ever made. I didn't walk away angry. I walked away aware. Awareness is quieter than rage, but far more permanent. When betrayal finally loses its power over you, something unexpected happens. You stop needing explanations. You stop rehearsing conversations that will never change anyone. You stop hoping people will suddenly become honest. That freedom is unsettling at first because pain had become familiar. But slowly, peace replaces it. I didn't win by destroying anyone's reputation or exposing secrets. I won by choosing myself without apology. For a long time, I thought strength meant endurance, staying, adjusting, absorbing discomfort in the name of love. Now I understand that real strength is discernment, knowing when something is no longer aligned with your values and leaving before it reshapes you. Betrayal taught me that lesson brutally, but clearly. The silence I kept wasn't weakness, it was self-respect forming. And once self-respect appears, manipulation loses its grip completely. If this story feels uncomfortably familiar, it's because many people live inside quiet betrayals every day. They sense something is wrong, but doubt themselves. They explain others' behavior instead of trusting their instincts. Let this be your reminder. Clarity is not cruelty. Distance is not failure. Walking away does not mean you lost. Sometimes it means you finally stopped losing. If you stayed till the end, take a moment and sit with your own truth. Share this story with someone who might need it. And if you believe silence can be powerful, subscribe for more stories where quiet strength speaks the loudest. These stories are for those rebuilding quietly, healing privately, and choosing dignity over drama, patience over noise, and self-worth over approval, one deliberate step at a time, without asking permission and without explaining themselves to anyone else who no longer need validation, ever.